What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of Bischoff and Brown right here on the Detroit Lions podcast. He's Scott Bischoff. I'm Russ Brown. We are back after a marvelous, just smash mouth, just decimating of the Dallas Cowboys. Our Detroit Lions moved to 4-2 on the year, fresh off the bye, doing exactly what we kind of thought they were going to do. Just
aren't they they're 4-1?
4-1, excuse me.
Yeah.
I took 4-2 as I don't know.
I got you.
I'm an idiot. Not mathing on a Tuesday.
That's all good.
Yeah, but we're jumping right in. He's Scott Bischoff. I'm Russ Brown. You guys know that. Look, 47-9 was not what I had on my bingo card by any means. The worst loss for Jerry Jones as the owner of the Dallas Cowboys at home. So
you
that's
feel bad about that?
Not at all.
Way?
Not even the slightest. And we talked about it last week. I just had kind of this feeling, and I said it to people that, came up and asked me about the game and talking to people or whatever. And it's like, yeah, I think this is one of those where they are going to absolutely destroy them. And I kept saying it, and you said it as well a little bit last week. And it's just like, felt like one of those spots where they're going to put pedal to the metal, gas pedal to the ground. And that's exactly what they did. And regardless of some of the bad news that came from the game, a lot of positives came out of it because the defense played so well. They forced 5 turnovers. Brian Branch played probably his best game as a Lion, I would say.
He is.
That's where we'll just jump into the defense.
Okay.
I mean,
yeah.
So much
about it. There's so much. Like, Terry, you put it on your Twitter. You put a little video of Terry and Arnold on your Twitter feed. It's him covering a short slant. I don't know. Was it to Tolbert? I don't know who it was to.
Yeah, I believe it was to Tolbert. Yes.
And it's not that he jumps that route, which I think a lot of corners will do that and not take the necessary steps and all that stuff. He takes the step outside. Tolbert, flashes, some nice footwork and gets what I'm sure he thinks is open on that slant. But Arnold has such ridiculous reactive athleticism, and I want to keep calling it that because it's really what it is. It's just the ability to mirror a player in front of you's movements. And he's got, I think he has, I don't want to say, well, I'm going to say it. I think he has a rare ability to mirror what a receiver is doing, which helps him to stay in phase so much. Like he's always right where he needs to be. Obviously, there's the penalty issue and the grabbiness, whatever. But from that reactive athleticism standpoint, you could see Tolbert running the slant. You could see Arnold take his steps and then just recover and hang with him and then kind of come over the top and make a play on the ball. And it was just like, that is phenomenal. That was a great play. Step by step, right? Let's just let this young man play and just play, just brick by brick, just build it up.
Yeah.
I thought he played great. But to your point about Branch, man, wow. Like there's so much to his game.
Mm-hmm.
He is going to be looked at, down the road, I think he's going to be looked at as one of the better picks in the Brad Holmes era, simply because I know he was a second rounder, but he was a first round player.
Yes, 100%.
We talked openly the day after round 1. Well, I should say we talked openly after round 2 of that draft, and both of us thought the exact same thing. And I remember it, thinking if you just swapped out the names, right, in round 2, and you put them in round 1, you put the round 1 guys in round 2, we'd love it. You and I would have, because I think we both really saw Branch as a premier slot corner type player, pretty dominant near the ball. and that's what he's doing. And he's making plays in ways that I didn't necessarily think that he would coming into the NFL, deeper down the field away from the line of scrimmage. He's making plays like that too. So phenomenal.
And it's weird seeing him so deep sometimes, like in a deeper alignment, like 12 to 15 yards off the ball. And then you see him buzz down and make great breaks on the football. And then you see him in the red zone, able to just undercut a jump ball kind of situation. And I just, you look at him in every way he plays the game. There's just no way you have to love it. You have to appreciate the way he plays, whether you're a fan of the Lions or not. He is such a stud, and I think there's 31 other teams in the NFL that would love to have him. But certainly the Lions are by far thrilled that they have him. And to your point on Tyrion Arnold, we've talked about it for weeks. He's always in phase, certainly more physical than the opposition, but just to see some of that fluidity and that ability to mirror, like you said, with that physicality, that's a rare combination to have. And not saying it's going to be the Hall of Fame combination, because I don't know. I mean, who knows?
Kind of early, right? 6 games or 5 games early.
But he's starting to clean up some of that grabbiness, and he's not getting called for it as much. And he's starting to stay even more in phase. And like you said, mirror, but he's starting to really get those hands through the catch point a little bit more consistently, and getting that free hand off of the receiver or tight end or whoever he's covering. So I think there's so many positives with what happened. Anzalone, Jack Campbell, both those guys played really well. I'm noticing kind of a trend right now with Malcolm Rodriguez and interior defensive linemen. They are starting to kind of align him into the A and B gap, and they're starting to do these twists and these line stunts with him, and he'll blitz and he'll take on 2 blockers, and wrapping around on the twist is McNeil or Reeder or somebody else like Ozarike or even Pascal. And I will say, I mean, we'll pivot into the Aiden Hutchinson stuff in a little bit, but Josh Pascal had a good game too. I mean, There were some question marks about his start to the season, and I thought he played his best game of the year, just with some of his speed to power and how explosive he is for a player his size. So I think there's a lot of positives to this defense, and I think there's a stat going around. I would have to pull it up, but Kirby Joseph's stat of what he's been able to do defensively. And I mean, he plays a big part to it. He's the only NFL player to have 4 interceptions in the end zone in a season since 2006. And this is from the Lions PR department. When teams have thrown passes in the end zone against the Lions this year, they are 1 for 14 for 10 yards with 1 touchdown and 5 interceptions and a 23.8 quarterback rating. So I'm
not great at the math, but I think that's pretty good if you're the Lions.
Yeah. And I mean, it fits that narrative, bend, don't break. Like, you look at what, the start of that game was, the Cowboys started to kind of get their way. They had the penalties going their way. It kind of felt like, oh, this is going to be one of those long days.
I was pissy about it.
And Lamb had the one-handed catch, and it was like, oh my God, here we go. And then they bent a little bit, but they didn't break. They came up with giving up 3 points. And if they're not doing that, they're coming up with big interceptions like Brian Branch, and Kirby Joseph could have had one. And, there's so many positives with what they're doing, and you love to see it. Yeah,
for sure. That, I thought McNeil played phenomenal in that game. We are starting to see the DJ Reeder effect. And I think it's a very real thing that will continue. Their interior pass rush is legit. And you could see now I think Zach Martin is injured, was injured coming into this game, and he wasn't at his best. So, some of that, but McNeil getting to places where, probably surprised others that he was going to get to, including on the injury. But McNeil was awesome in that game. And I thought Reeder played a really good game. There was a play where Pascal took on could have been their right guard coming out to kick him out, coming all the way across the formation. He was playing on the right side. He was lined up outside the left tackle, and he just stoned the guard and just kind of shedded him and made a play on the runner. And it's just like physicality, man, it's there for days with him.
Yeah.
I do not think he's a crazy explosive edge bendy guy. I mean, that's not his game.
Right.
But as a glass chewing sort of, defensive end who's just going to out physical whoever's across from him, he can do all those things. They're going to need him. They're going to need him more now than ever. Yeah. Obviously, we're gonna let the Hutchinson thing slide just a little bit. Talk about their offense too, but their defense has been great. I mean, it's just been they have been phenomenal in every way through week 6 of the NFL season.
Yeah, and I mean, they played their best game of the season so far, so we'll see if this carries over into Minnesota against Sam Darnold and Justin Jefferson and that Vikings offense, and we will get into the Vikings preview here in a little bit, but switching gears to the Lions offense, I mean, every play was in the playbook, and it was on display on Sunday, and they got every playmaker involved, from Taylor Decker to Dan Skipper to Penei Sewell to Khalif Raymond having the best game of his season so far, Tim Patrick having the best game of his season so far. That's where I was going to start. Tim Patrick just not doing anything too crazy, but you get 3-4 receptions from him for 50, 60 yards a game. That's exactly what Josh Reynolds was doing pretty much every week last year and the year before, and that's what they were looking for. And what makes him so different to all the receivers that they have is certainly his size, but what he can do vertically down the field, the way he adjusted on what should have been defensive pass interference, but whatever. That first catch.
Isn't it really refreshing? Not to interrupt, I apologize.
No, you're good.
That Goff trusts him to put the ball there.
Exactly.
If Goff doesn't trust him, there's no way he's just going to rip that in down there. He's just not going to do it. So I think it's nothing but a great sign for their offense that Patrick is doing what he's doing, and it's not like this is not just a one-off. He's ramping it up over the last 3 games.
Yep.
So I think that we've talked at length about what an explosive Jameson Williams does for this offense. It's very clear he's there. He's there already.
Yeah.
So you throw him in the mix. You throw Patrick with his ability down the field and over in the middle of the field, and with his size, like you mentioned, and their offense is just ridiculous.
Yep,
it just is, and
that's without using Sam Laporta. I mean, Sam Laporta had 1 catch on 1 target for 52 yards.
It was a beauty.
It was off a flea, a little reverse flea flicker type deal. But yeah, the trust with Tim Patrick and Jared Goff is legit. It's been building for the last couple of weeks. You can tell. You can tell because of the dig routes. And I've talked about it time and time again on this show, on Twitter or X. The dig routes is something that is a mainstay in the Lions offense. It's something that it helps build timing. It helps keep Goff in rhythm. It helps sustain drives. And they didn't have really that guy up until Tim Patrick got activated and started playing. And now he's been doing it. He had a big catch down in the red zone doing it and getting them in there. And he's done it kind of back-to-back weeks. So I think that's going to continue. And obviously the JMO stuff, I'll probably let you go ahead and talk about him because he's just what he can do.
What is there to say? It's just the Lions right now are. I think they're the best team in football. Let's just say they're the best team in the NFC.
Mm-hmm.
Just because I don't want to have the Kansas City argument, and I would buckle probably very quickly if somebody pushed back and told me that the Chiefs were the best team in football. I'd probably say, "Yeah, you're right." I got over it. I got over my skis a little. But as far as the NFC goes, I think it's really them and maybe the 49ers. But the Lions, if we want to go to a different sport, like a boxing kind of a analogy kind of thing, they're a team that's gonna if they want to take a fight long and just outpoint somebody, they can do that. They can throw punches and knock you out too.
Yeah.
But they can also take shit. And they have shown us repeatedly that this is a mentally tough football team, a very physically tough football team. It matches the city. There's just so much to like about what they're doing. And then you throw in just how talented they are everywhere. It's just amazing to think about where they were 4 years ago, at the end of the Patricia Bob Quinn show, and where they are now. And it's just, they are a pretty well-rounded, very deep, as far as NFL teams go nowadays, a pretty deep team. They are. And everybody's involved, whether it's Khalif, whether it's them deciding we need to get Khalif Raymond more involved. And what did he have, 4 catches last week? 3 or 4?
Yep, 4.
Patrick's involved. You got both running backs involved. I know Laporta hasn't been involved that much, but I think it's coming, right? I think that there is opportunities for him there.
Yeah.
St. Brown is getting his, and Jamison Williams is showing you that he doesn't need a ton of target volume to be super productive and change games. He just doesn't.
Right.
And
that's the thing. It's like you don't need to force the ball to St. Brown or JMO like you did weeks 1 and 2. And then you don't need to force it to Sam Laporta. You get these other guys going. Teams now have to honor those guys. And guess what's going to happen? They honor that. That puts St. Brown in more one-on-one situations, which is what you want. Hence the red zone touchdown that he had. And then you get JMO one-on-one, which is going to lead to more deep shots, which they've done 35 plus yards or more in 4 out of their 5 games this year, outside of the Arizona game. And then that will, like you said, open things up for Sam Laporta. And I think the other thing too is with some of maybe the question marks around the defense that maybe we have as fans or analysts or even just the team, I'm sure there's some, I don't want to say doubt, but like, well, boy, who's the next guy that's going to step up for Hutch and all that stuff. But the way you keep your defense off the field is by sustaining drives and eating up as much clock as possible. And to me, they have one of the best running backs in the NFL with David Montgomery. I don't know where people want to rank him, but he might be the most underrated player in the NFL. I mean, call me a homer, biased. The difference that he makes running the football is ridiculous.
I think they have two of the best running backs in football.
Yes.
And unfortunately, there's one ball to go around, but there will be weeks where Montgomery's doing his thing, and there will be weeks where Gibbs is. But right now, Montgomery is just, he is such a dude. And the way he runs the physicality, all of it, and the nose for the end zone kind of stuff. It's just, there's nothing about their offense that they're just so electric while being sort of a grind you down sort of mentality offense, if that makes sense, with the ability to hit you over the top. So if you're a defense and you got to deal with that stuff and you don't know they're going to run it at us. Okay. That's tough. They get a really good offensive line. They get really good guards and Ragnall's back and Glasgow played pretty well. And Zeitler's playing really good. And then Penny Sewell doing his thing and Decker and all that stuff. All right. We got to defend the run. That's tough. Yeah. Oh, shit. We just gave up a long touchdown to Jamison Williams and now we're down multiple scores and we're in trouble. Right. And when we're like you and I used to be thinking about the Lions and how small their margin was to win games, other teams have to be thinking that right now too. Like, all right, we can't give up a big play really in this game at all, or the margin's gone. That's what the Lions are doing to other teams on the road. Like you put up 47 points in Dallas, and I think you kicked 4 field goals too, right? So it could have been more. Yeah. So it was just awesome. That kind of performance was an incredible performance, tainted by a horrific injury that we have to talk about. Yeah. It sucks. Yeah. Yeah. Aiden Hutchinson done for the year. Just unfortunate. It's just a freak accident to a freak player that was on his way to winning Defensive Player of the Year. It just is what it is. He was getting there. He was up to 8.5 sacks, I believe, on the year through 5 games played. My guy, Brandon Thorne on Twitter, phenomenal follow if you like stuff down in the trenches. Yes. He has a thing called true pressure rate, and Aiden Hutchinson had a pressure rate of 29.8 on his database, and nobody was even close. Nick Bosa is close at 26, but the next closest,
was 22.5 and 21.5. So just to show the difference of how far Aiden Hutchinson was compared to the next guy. And the unfortunate news for Detroit is the next closest guy is Levi Ozarike on that list at number 9. He's got a pressure rate of 9. Yeah. So there's some uncertainty there, but the Lions can scheme this up. And I guess we'll kind of start there as far as how do they replace him? Where do they replace him? What do they do to replace Hutch? Because my answer, and I think you'll probably have the same answer, is it's in-house and it's schematically doing something along the lines of like using more line stunts and taking Malcolm Rodriguez and sending him on blitzes and Brian Branch off the edge. And they're gonna have to draw things up. They might have to shift into more zone stuff than they would like, but there's a way to do it, and I think the Lions can get creative with how they need to generate pressure. I mean, that's the way I think they're going to do it.
Yeah, I mean, it makes me wonder if they'll go more hybrid looks up front, more 3-man looks with maybe a linebacker walked up kind of thing. They would have a huge bear kind of setup if they wanted to, with Reader as your nose, or shaded, right? And then McNeil and Pascal as your 5s, with Onwuzurike slipping in there at times. I mean, you could do it. You could do it that way. Like if you put those 4 guys on the field and you just, hey, defend the run and we'll blitz, we'll do other things to bring pressure, that kind of stuff. I guess one of the answers I have to the Hutch thing is that can you replace Hutchinson? And I think the answer is absolutely no. I just don't think you can do that, right? So, even if you were to go make a big trade, now when I say big trade, I don't mean Max Crosby, because I cannot see there's just no way he's even remotely available, and it doesn't work. Like, we want to pluck this guy off your roster, so you have to give him to us. We'll give you 2 first-round picks and whatever and more, but that doesn't mean that the Raiders should or would do that. Like, right. I think they'd be stupid to. He's still young. He's one of the best defensive ends in football.
He's their best player.
Yeah, like there's so much to that particular player where you would just say, yeah, he's not available. I mean, right. If he is and they end up doing that, whatever price they pay, I think is reasonable, simply because the window is open right now. Mm-hmm. And this injury sucks, but I just don't think he's a possibility. And
I don't think Myles Garrett is either.
No, I've heard some talk about Garrett too, and I know Cleveland they just traded Amari Cooper today, and they're losing, and that whole scenario is just crazy.
Disaster.
It really is. It's unreal to think about what's gone on there.
A disaster.
Yeah. So I don't think Myles Garrett's now we could be wrong, right? I mean, they could do one of these moves, but I think you're looking more at a player like Trey Hendrickson. We've mentioned him for a couple of weeks. I'm not even sure he's available. Like, right. Really good edge players don't come available very often. And if they do, they're really old, or the situation has devolved to, with where they are, to where they got to get moved. So to me, you're looking at, an older player like Zadarius Smith might be a possibility. I don't know. Azeez Ojulari from the Giants might be a possibility, but Kayvon Thibodeau just went to IR. He's out for the next 3 weeks.
Right.
Ojulari's starting there. Andrew Thomas went to IR today, or I shouldn't have said IR. He's got a foot injury that sounds like it could be bad. So it's a team that's underperforming already. I would imagine that. I would imagine that Dable and those guys have to feel like if they don't win some games here soon, that they're going to be gone, including Shane, the GM. Yeah. So I don't know how willing they would be to trade a starter for a pick kind of player thing. I'm not sure if they would do that. So that's kind of the problem with naming names and coming up with fixes to this problem. Is I don't know that there is a real good solution to the problem. Like you said, it's probably more in-house than it is going to find somebody. But if you're going to go find somebody, I think it's going to be an older player who might have a little tread left on his tires, but not a lot. So
and it seems like they're trying to avoid the older player route. So that's why they signed Isaiah Thomas today out of he came out of Oklahoma, but he was drafted in the 7th round of the Cleveland Browns and got into some legal stuff. And I was a little surprised by him because just the character stuff. When he was coming out, I had heard a lot of stuff about character about him. So when I saw that today, I was like, wow, that's pretty surprising. But I think it's one of those where you're just trying to maybe make it work. Personally, I think they have somebody on the practice squad that they're really keeping tabs on, that he's not ready yet. And I've talked about him before. But that's the Mitchell Acuity guy. I think that's the guy that they're kind of banking on for some point this year. And Dan Campbell kind of said it today during his interview with 97.1 The Ticket, talking about how he was like, we don't need some superstar here. We just need a role player. We need guys that want to do their role and do their job. And I think that's why I'm so like content with the idea of they're going to keep this thing in house unless some name gets made available that they know that they can go trade for. But I don't know who that name is going to be. You mentioned some great names, but we just don't know. I mean, I don't think it's going to be a superstar move, and teams value pass rushers. You're not going to just trade a valuable pass rusher unless there's some baggage there.
Yeah, I mean, like Max Crosby's 27. Why would, even if you are, the Raiders are very clearly, making moves for the future. They traded Davante Adams today. They need a quarterback, right? I mean, so they're going to be in position to take a quarterback early in the next draft, which good luck, by the way. But
yes,
it's not like Max Crosby is a player who's going to come along, and it's just, it's just super unrealistic to think about. But the Lions, I mean, they got to do something. It's just, unfortunately, I don't think there's a great solution to a significant. The reason why there's no solution is because of what Hutchinson is for this team. He's the heartbeat for this team,
right?
And there's really no good way to replacing that, right? So it's, but the only thing I'll say is that, we need to look at the locker room too. Like the locker room seems to be in a really good place.
Yeah.
They took the injury to Hutchinson really well. I think the team took it significantly better than its fans and media has, right? Yes. I do. And their response to it was, hey, let's ball out. And in the second half, they played ridiculous football. They did some crazy stuff. They had some fun, so they didn't kind of go into a shell, and they didn't tank, if anything, it was the opposite. It looked like they played
rallied together.
It really did. So, the offense is good enough to carry this team. It is. So, is it a total? I mean, it's devastating, right? You lose a player like Hutchinson. It sucks. But like Campbell's saying, if you could just get everybody along the way to buy into what they're doing, and he has. They still have a lot of talent on that defensive line.
Yeah.
They just don't necessarily have a player who can, hit home runs and get pressures like Hutchinson could. But we'll see how they decide they want to resolve and do the best they can to generate pressure.
Yeah.
They're smart guys. I think they'll figure out ways to do it. It's just going to be very different than the way it was. I think the bigger picture is, can we get Hutchinson back for the start of the 2025 season the way he was at 425 on Sunday?
Right.
That's the biggest thing. Like that's more important than really anything going on.
Yeah. What type of player will he be? Yes.
Yeah. Yeah. Just get him back the way he was. And yeah, it sucks that this happened. There's adversity. They can overcome it. They're a good enough team that they can.
Right.
It's going to be a really interesting this week, man. This matchup is fascinating. Looking at what Minnesota does and how well they're playing on both sides of the ball. This one's going to be a tough matchup.
Yeah, and I mean, I agree with everything that you said on Hutch. It sucks. It absolutely sucks. But more importantly, what's he going to be like just as a person, as a player, coming back from the injury? I think he'll be fine. I really do. Because it doesn't sound like there hasn't been much, but it doesn't sound like there's a lot of ligament or muscle tissue stuff. It was just the bone thing. So
yeah,
we'll see what happens. But and I to cap it off, the thing that I think that impressed me the most was the locker room speech after the game. Jared Goff calling Dan Campbell back into the middle, giving him the game ball, seeing the reaction, and just how humble Dan Campbell was, and the words from Jared Goff of like, you are the heartbeat of our team, you reassuring, like, as long as we have this guy leading, we're going to be okay. And that's what you kind of take it out of. And it's like, how do you not get teary-eyed or rally around that? Like, that is a team right there. So I think they're going to be fine. And we'll see how it plays out against Minnesota this week. That's our preview for week 7 in the NFL for our Lions, 4-1 against a 5-0 Minnesota Viking football team that they have the best defense in the NFL. I mean, it's not even close to what Brian Flores has been able to do defensively there. Just some stuff coverage-wise. He is a lot of cover 2, a lot of cover 4 with a little mix of cover 3, according to Match Quarters, which is a great website for defensive coverages and things like that. Cover 2 is 29% of the time. Cover 4 is 28% of the time. Really just, I mean, not like league leading type of stuff, but they send a lot of blitzes and those types of things. I mean, they blitz at an incredible rate. Not the most in the NFL, but it's certainly up there. When they rush 3, it's 12% of the time. When they rush 4, it's 51% of the time. Rushing 5 is 26% of the time. And when they want to rush 6, it's 11% of the time. So I'm not going to do all the math of, the pie chart and all that, but like, they send pressure, and they're rarely going to send 3. They're more likely going to send 4, 5, or 6. The good news is we have the Lions offensive line, which I think is the best offensive line in football. And Minnesota hasn't faced that yet this year. I mean, they have not played a team like Detroit. And I think that's the difference maker in this whole thing is Detroit is just, they're the better team that they've played so far this year outside of maybe San Francisco. I mean, the Giants don't have the same offensive line. The Texans don't really have the same offensive line. They played the Packers pretty tight, and then they played the Jets. I mean, I think this is a very winnable game for them regardless, and I'm not trying to be too cocky or arrogant, but it's going to be tough. But this offensive line...
it's a tough matchup, and it seems like they do a good job defending the run too, so they put themselves in situations where Flores has done a good job putting that defense in a situation where they can blitz. Because it might be 3rd and long kind of stuff. But the Lions' ability to run the ball is different than what they have faced, what they have seen.
Yeah.
That's going to be kind of the nuts and bolts of that Lions O versus Vikings D matchup is what can the Lions do running the ball, putting themselves in favorable down and distance situations. I mean, that's football, and that's football, right? I mean, that's at every level. But, because of their ability to blitz and get home, and they have good pass rushers. Van Ginkel's a really good player. Greenard's a good player.
Yeah.
I would fear the Lions dropping back Goff a ton, in this matchup. Yeah. So that's the one thing you don't want to do is you don't want to let Minnesota, get up to where you're chasing points. So game script is going to be a big deal. In a perfect world, you're ahead, or it's a tight game where you're able to execute what you want to do on offense, which is to try to limit possessions. Because I don't love the idea of trying to defend Justin Jefferson all over the field and Addison and all the other stuff that they've got going on. With Darnold playing the way he is, he's playing at a high level. And their offensive line is really, really good.
Right.
Pass pro. More on the edges. I think Darisaw and O'Neal are really good tackles. Yeah. I think they can be had a little bit on the interior.
Yep.
But I wouldn't expect the Lions edge players to show up and get a bunch of pressures and make Darnold uncomfortable. So that's, Flores is doing a really good job. Their defense is playing great. And the O'Connell offense it's tough. It's tough to stop everything that they have. Really fascinated to see how they decide they want to line up and how they're going to cover Jefferson and who they're going to put in a position to cover him.
I was just going to ask that. I was going to say, do you think they send somebody across the field a bunch to shadow him? Do they take the veteran in Carlton Davis? Do they put the youngster in Tyrion Arnold? Is it Brian Branch because Justin Jefferson can play inside and outside? What do you do in that situation? Because he is so difficult to defend. And I think it's one of those where do the Lions just kind of accept it and say, he's going to get his, we got to limit how much he gets it. How many times does he go back up for seconds and thirds and those types of things?
But that's how they approached it last year, was just, okay, you go ahead and get your 180 yards. That's fine.
Right.
But we're going to stop everybody else.
Yeah, we'll stop everybody else. And I think it's a great way. It's frustrating on a Sunday afternoon, but it is a great way of approaching it, especially when your offense, it feels like at any point can put up 21, 24, 35 points, somewhere in that range. It's a big range, but it feels like they can get 20 plus points a game anytime they want.
Yeah, their offense is so electric. They just are. And there's so many ways that they can beat teams. Carlton Davis, it sounds like he's in concussion protocol.
Yeah.
Do I have that? Am I wrong about that?
I believe he is. I have not checked the injury report today, but I believe you are correct on that.
So that's going to be a big deal. And from the sense that I don't love the idea of, hey, rookie Tyrion Arnold, there's Justin Jefferson. You've got him for X number of snaps this week. That's a tough ask. Even if you give him safety help over the top, it's tough. So I would expect, I hope Davis returns and gets cleared and is ready to go, because they're going to need him in this matchup against Justin Jefferson, and just to try to limit him and mitigate it, a little bit. But it's a tough ask. It's a huge game. The Vikings are 5-0. The Lions are 4-1, like you said. This is going to be one of those games that in, 2.5 months or whatever it is, we look back and think that was the game that decided whether or not one of these teams gets a bye in the first round.
Yeah.
And the other team might have to travel in week 1 to play in the playoffs.
Right.
So big deal. This one is a big one.
And it's going to come down to the kind of that last possession, last part of the second half, fourth quarter type thing where we're not going to, I don't think we're going to see it be very one-sided like we saw this past Sunday against the Cowboys.
Yeah, I don't.
It's going to be 24-20, 24-17, 21-20. It might be 21-20. I don't know,
Yeah.
Jake Bates is going to have to make every field goal, every extra point, and every point's going to matter. And it does feel like one of those games where Dan Campbell is going to be faced with some adversity of 4th down and 2. Does he take the points? Does he go for it on the road? What's going to happen? But I trust the creativity in Ben Johnson, and I do trust the creativity of Aaron Glenn. I feel like when his back is against the wall, he tends to call one of his better games. So I think that might end up happening. Not saying they're going to shut him out, but I think they're going to be able to force a turnover or two. And Alex Anzalone's been close to a couple of picks this year. Jack Campbell, not necessarily, but he's constantly going to strip the football or punch it out.
Yeah.
So maybe he does what he did against Seattle. And we've talked about Tyrion Arnold being in phase. He's close to getting that first career pick. Maybe it comes up this weekend against Minnesota. It's gonna be interesting. I feel good about it, though. I feel like this is one of those games that they can win, that they should win. I mean, they're just overall, they're the better football team. And I know what the statistics say and what the numbers say, but they are the better football team. I think they're the better coached football team. And I just feel good about it. Maybe I'm going to eat my words next week, but that's how I feel.
I feel good about it too. Just recognizing that the Vikings are a really good football team, right? So this is a premium matchup. Mm-hmm. And ironically, the NFC North is the best division in football, and it's right now not close, right? Like, I mean, the Packers are playing good football right now. I think the Bears are they 4-2?
Yeah, they're figuring it out.
Yeah. But this one in particular, you have an undefeated team and you have a team with a huge injury. I mean, one of the things in sports that does happen, and we have to recognize this is when there's so much emotion that goes through you. Sometimes there's a little letdown that happens. And you could see it in games like hockey in the playoffs when a team wins a game in overtime that maybe they shouldn't have won, and there's just so much emotion that comes out. And then, the next game they play and they just kind of struggle to get out.
Right.
Like they don't start on time kind of thing. So,
right.
I'm not saying that's going to happen, but
I am a little surprised that this is not a primetime game. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I look at it, New York and Pittsburgh is the primetime game on Sunday night. This just feels like this should be the Sunday night game. And I'm not, discrediting the Jets and the Steelers. I get kind of the history there, but with how these two teams are kind of smash mouth football teams and the NFC North being as good as it is, it's a little surprising right now that they did try to flex this one out. But overall, yeah, I'm with you. I got to acknowledge the Vikings being good, but I feel good about this Lions game. As we should every week. I mean, until the wheels fall off, there's no reason to really hit the panic button. And I don't see the wheels falling off with Dan Campbell and Brad Holmes. These guys are just too good at what they do.
No, and I think we'll just wrap up this way: is that if there's something crazy that comes along, and the Lions make a move, you'll hear from us. We'll make a quick one, and But until that happens, I just don't think that that's going to happen. I think it'll be. If there's a move, I mean, obviously they made the move today with the dude from Cincinnati, but with Isaiah Thomas, I'm not sure what to expect there. It's just to me, he may be a replacement. He might be depth, right? So, and you're going to need that. You're going to get tested with that stuff. Yeah. But could I see them making a move for like a Zadarius Smith or Ojulari? Like I said, sure. But, how impactful is that going to be in the big picture? It's just another player that you're bringing in to do a job. I'm with you. I feel good about this matchup too, but the recognition is that the Vikings are playing really good football. Mm-hmm. The Lions are too. So great matchup, two really good teams. Should be a really fun game to watch.
Yep. No, I agree. And if you are the team that we all think that you are, at the end of the day, you'll be 5-1, no matter what the score says, no matter the injuries, no matter what the roster is. If we think what you are, Super Bowl contending team, you win this game. And that just is what it is. And we'll see how it goes. But that's it. That's all I got. I know that's all you got. Lions, Vikings preview. We put a bow on the Lions Cowboys game, and obviously had to talk a little Hutch, but he's Scott Bischoff. I'm Russ Brown. You guys can find us on Twitter or X at Russ NFL Draft, at Bischoff_Scott. Of course, you can rate, review, and subscribe to Detroit Lions Podcast on YouTube, Apple Pod, Spotify, all other podcast platforms. So we will be back next week sometime to recap the Vikings game. We'll preview the next game, and we'll just keep this thing moving. And hopefully we get some more clarification of what this defense is going to look like on Sunday without Aiden Hutchinson. But until then, he's Scott Bischoff. I'm Russ Brown. We are Bischoff and Brown right here on the Detroit Lions Podcast.